Corruption. Corruption. Throughout history, corruption has presented an implausible dilemma that man has been unable to find a solution for. Too complicated? Let's start off with the sausage theory. For those of you that are unaware of what the sausage theory is, I have a little demonstration for you. We went ahead and placed various items under some of your seats. So would you be kind enough please to look under your seats? Okay, if you have found some lipstick, please raise your hands in the air. Okay, so do you know what you're holding in your hand right now? You are actually holding beetle blood in your hand. I know that's disgusting, but the blood of the cochlear insect is actually used in the manufacturing of several makeup products, such as the one you're holding in your hand right now. And I don't know about you, but I think that there's a lot of beetle blood on your faces today. And now, if you found a chocolate bar beneath your seats, could you please raise your hand in the air? Okay? Before you go ahead and actually eat that, you might want to know that there are actually insect legs in it. And the theme might be recurring, but organizations like the Food and Drug Administration actually allow for a certain percentage of insect legs to be present in their products. Products such as the one you're holding in your hand right now, and products such as one I'm sure a lot of people are addicted to. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is basically what the sausage theory is. The sausage theory states that if you like or love something, do not find out how it's made. And notice how you're all grossed out right now? Well, let me tell you my own personal sausage theory story. About 6 years ago, I started really getting into following football, especially watching Arsenal, the best football team on earth. Now, as time changed, I changed from a casual fan into a completely obsessed freak. I came to know every player's name, their nationality, what club they play for, their preferred food, who they like to play with, and anything else. I was insane. It even got to a point where I myself was employed by an international blogging website, writing about anything remotely related to football, but that's beyond the point. Anyways, as my obsession with the sport grew, as I read more books, more blogs, more articles, as I watched more matches, and as I talked to more people, in the end I came to a hideous conclusion. I came to a conclusion that my passion for the sport had blinded me for all those years. I came to a conclusion that I wanted to refute with every inch of my existence. I came to a conclusion that the beautiful game of football was as corrupt gets. Now, let's go back and see what corruption is. Corruption is in general defined as any illegal misuse of entrusted power for personal gain, especially by powerful people. But we all know that that is not correct. We all know that corruption is a much more complex issue. Corruption can appear in all fields of life. It can range from sneaky embezzlement to blatant abuse of power. In fact, corruption is such an ever-present issue that I am quite certain that almost everyone in this room has witnessed some sort of corrupt activity in their life. Now, there are certain examples of ethical corruption in sports that we are all aware of. Lance Armstrong, Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez. These are all athletes that have been proven to have used some sort of performance-enhancing drugs to ensure success. This is the same type of corruption, and we look down on this, and rightly so.
But what if I tell you this is totally not what we're talking about? What if I tell you this is totally not what we're talking about? What if I tell you that we're talking about the unseen forms of corruption? Because corruption is so much more. That's the whole point. Let me start off with a simple example. The world's largest ever sports event in history, the notorious World Cup. A cup where 32 countries from all over the world get together to play the beautiful game of football. But what happens behind the scenes is everything but beautiful. Let me start off with this year's World Cup, the Brazil 2016 World Cup. A confirmed 8 to 10 people were killed in the midst of building the stadiums for the Brazil 2016 World Cup. 8 to 10 people. Why? due to bad working conditions or accidental acts. Okay. The Qatar 2022 World Cup. A confirmed 1,000 people were killed in the midst of building the stadiums for the Qatar 2022 World Cup. An American law firm, DLA Piper, confirmed the death of 1,000 people in the midst of only building one stadium, let alone 12. Other than that, FIFA, the organizing body of the World Cup, has been involved in several acts of embezzlement, bribery, personal abuse of power, and extortion. 1,000 people. That's more than double the amount of people sitting here in Nisaya right now. 1,000 people. Please look around you and get to think about that for a while.
And maybe you won't be able to relate to this example because you're not into sport. And that's perfectly fine. So let's take fashion as another example. The horrible conditions that these workers have to endure are similar to the conditions that sweatshop workers all over the world operate under. 2 years ago, for example, a Bangladeshi building containing 5 different factories collapsed. The factories were supposed to be exporting products to large Western names such as Walmart, Primark, and Benetton. The collapse killed 1,200 workers. 1,200 innocent workers. 1,200 innocent workers that should have been evacuated the day before when large cracks began to appear in the building. The mere fact that we can simply compare incidents on this large scale and use the fatalities as a reference point is simply disgusting. Lives should not be taken this easily. And you want to know another horrible truth? Despite thinking that we abolished slavery many years ago, it has been present in our lives in several subtle forms. One of those forms is third-party ownership. Third-party ownership, or TPO, is a practice that takes place a lot in football. What TPO basically is, a player is divided into percentages, much like how a company is divided into shares. The percentages are then divided between the player himself, his club, and the third entity. The third entity could be a bank, a firm, or a supermarket, for all anyone cares. And it all depends on how much each person pays. Now, the problem with this is that under normal conditions, the transfer rights of the player, meaning who decides where exactly he goes, would lie between him and his club. But under TPO, the decision lies in the hand of whoever has paid the most, whoever has the highest percentage of the player. And this is why former vice chairman of the English Football Association, David Dean, once stated that this practice is akin to enslaving players. And it is, in fact, a modern variation of slavery. The players are hoarded all around the world, depending on who pays the most or how much an investment in them would yield. It presents a notion or belief that goes against everything that football stands for. So let's take a look at David Beckham as an example. David Beckham is a player that almost everyone is aware of. He's a player that many people think he has it all. He does what he loves for a living. He's really famous. He has a loving family. And most importantly, he has a lot of money. But imagine if David Beckham was divided into parts. Imagine if David Beckham was divided into parts that were auctioned off all over the world depending on who pays the most. Imagine if David Beckham's moves from England to Spain, from Spain to the US, from the US to France. Imagine if all these moves were forced upon him. Imagine if his family didn't want to move but were forced to do so because his owner said so. Now, wouldn't that taint your image of football? It would do to me. Luckily, David Beckham is a free man. But for every free David Beckham, there's an enslaved player. A player who is sold around the world for profit and not for his skills. A player who has to move around the world and play for clubs that he doesn't want to play for just because his owner says so. A player who doesn't own enough of a percentage of himself to decide where he goes. Now, try and tell me that that is not slavery.
Quite similar to record labels. When a musician signs a binding contract with a record label, they are basically bound to be controlled by what the record label orders them to do. The musicians have no control over the music they play, what gets produced, or what they perform, or where they perform. The musician's freedom is controlled by the record label just because they signed a binding contract, which is initially as complex as ever just to get their music produced. The musician's freedom is exploited by the record label just because the organization has control over what they do. Another form of modern slavery.
So, when was football more important than freedom and rights? When was football more important than life and death? You want to know the truth? The truth is, It wasn't. But money was and still is. Football has become this corrupt because of the money that we pay. It has become this corrupt because of the money that we pay to subscribe to the channels that broadcast the games. It has become this corrupt because of the money that we pay to buy our team's merchandise. And it has become this corrupt because of the money that we pay to buy tickets to go to the matches. We're not telling you that we are to blame for this, and we are definitely not telling you to boycott the sport, because I, for one, would definitely not do that. But what we are telling you is that we are all, in fact, a part of it, and we need to be aware of our role in it all.
But you know what the idea is? The idea is that we're not talking about sports. We're not talking about sports, we're not talking about fashion, we're not talking about music. Because all these aspects were just forms of distraction from the ever-present corruption in society. From politics to human rights, from economics to the environment, the world has become so corrupt to an extent that the forms of distraction from corruption are now more corrupt than ever. But you know what the idea is? The idea is that we're not talking about corruption. We're talking about our ignorance. About the fact that we are a part of what's happening around us and we don't know that. About the fact that we are actually part of the society that is so corrupt and we lack knowledge of that. Donald Rumsfeld once said, there are known knowns. These are things that we know. There are known unknowns. These are things that we know we don't know. And there are unknown unknowns. These are things that we don't know. Too theoretical? Let me take that from a business analogy. In risk management, a known known is a risk that can be easily identified with results that are reliably predictable. In known unknowns, these are risks that can be easily identified with lack of knowledge of the results that it provides for the firm. But in unknown unknowns, these are risks that cannot be even identified. Risks that the firm doesn't know it has, risks that the business lacks knowledge of. But then when I got to think about my known unknowns and my unknown unknowns, at first I thought about my known unknowns. I thought about the Big Bang Theory, the universe, God. These are things that I know exist or know happen but lack knowledge of. But then I got to think about my unknown unknowns. And I literally had nothing to think about. The idea was just so out of my scope of thought that I just stood there. Unknown unknowns. These are things that I don't know. Take the example of sports corruption. To some of us, we knew sports was corrupt. We knew everything that happened behind the scenes. And we had knowledge of the corruption that sports provided in everyday lives. To others of us, we knew sports was corrupt, but lacked knowledge of everything that happened behind the scenes. But to most of us, we knew nothing. We knew nothing of the fact that sports was as corrupt as ever. But then when I got to think about that, I found out that unknown unknowns are relative. An unknown unknown to me might be a known unknown to you.
And the known unknown to me might be an unknown unknown to you.
And a known known to me might be a known unknown to Bahgat. But then when I got to think about that, you know the sausage theory Bahgat discussed earlier? Yeah, I thought about that too. Yeah, it's wrong. The real sausage theory was actually said by Otto von Bismarck, Germany's prime minister in the 19th century, and stated, the less people know about how politics and sausages are made, the better they sleep at night. When I thought about that quote, I thought about my unknown unknowns, and I thought that it's not just being more knowledgeable, it's not just looking around me and finding out stuff that happens in my society. It's about the idea that there are forces that are actually stopping me from doing so. There are forces that are actually hindrance, obstacles, walls that are stopping me from knowing what they don't want me to know. So it's not about being more knowledgeable, it's about that we have to explore, we have to inquire, we have to traverse, we have to think from an abstract perspective.
We must not take anything for granted. We must search for answers. We must become inquisitive.
And then, and only then, will we let our unknowns be known. Thank you.